please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Hi, very good morning. You're watching Power Breakfast on CNBC TV18. I'm Ekta Batra and with me is Mangalam Malu. Well, we've returned back after a long weekend, but we have a whole lot of cues to work with today.
Absolutely, Ekta. Good morning. You know, you speak about earnings, but remember it's also the expiry week, so that will also be playing a part in the markets. But here's a look at all the top headlines that we're tracking this morning. Asian markets, they trade higher. A landslide election victory for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe sends the yen lower. The dollar spikes to over 3-month high.
And as we enter summer 2074, market veterans remain optimistic on the road ahead. Ramdev Agarwal expects select stocks to do well. Ramesh Damani sees the next 6 months to be a litmus test for earnings. Atul Suri has a nifty call of 17,000 over the next 4 years.
The Indian Banks Association writes to the IT Ministry and says UIDAI has no jurisdiction over banks, says only the RBI is empowered to issue directives to banks. Meanwhile, the Reserve Bank of India clears the Aadhaar air, says linking mandatory for bank accounts under laundering rules.
On earnings watch then, watch out for Havells. Solid revenue growth to be led by Lloyd Consolidated. Numbers and price hikes. Indiabulls Housing and Hindustan Zinc also report numbers today.
An Indian Energy Exchange will list on the exchanges today. The IPO was subscribed 2.28 times earlier this month. Well, first up, let's take a look at the Asian markets. They are trading higher as the dollar spiked to more than 3-month highs. Remember, over the weekend, we got a snap election in Japan on Sunday, a landslide election victory for Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. That has taken the yen lower as we speak. It's closer to that 114. So all the exporters in Japan doing fairly well. Pull up the intraday charts perhaps of Toyota as well as the others. So the Japanese index up almost 0.8%. Absolutely flat as far as the Korean markets are concerned. But remember, the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's election has paved the path for a continuation of loose monetary policy, which is why we're seeing that weakness on the yen. As far as the other indices are concerned, both of them sitting with a gain of close to 0.5%, the Straits as well as the Taiwanese index. And the SGX Nifty indicates that at the earliest, as far as the open is concerned, we may recoup and regain that 10,200 mark. And remember, the SGX Nifty compares to the Nifty futures close on Thursday, which was 10146. So we have slightly higher start as far as the SGX Nifty is concerned. And let's move on to the big story then. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's ruling coalition secured a 2/3 supermajority after winning 312 out of 465 seats. Abe's ruling bloc scored a big win in Sunday's election, bolstering his chance of becoming the nation's longest-serving premier and re-energizing his push to revise the pacifist constitution. CNBC's Akiko Fujita reports.
This really was the best possible outcome from Prime Minister Shinzo Abe as he really looks to cement his place in Japanese history as the longest-serving leader in modern history. And when you consider that big win last night, it certainly looks like the Prime Minister is on his way to secure that third term as Prime Minister in the leadership vote next year. You know, there was so much excitement going into this election period about these new parties that were formed. But in the end, a lot of those fizzled out, especially the Tokyo Governor Yuriko Koike's Party of Hope. Remember all the excitement several weeks ago that perhaps she could be the big opposition a lot of voters have been waiting for. Well, in the end, she only managed to secure 49 seats to the 312 for the ruling party. The Constitutional Democrats.
Video game hai kya? Investing is a serious business, requiring years of research.
Narnolia.
My new multi-utility pressure cooker from Prestige. I can saute and deep fry in it and also use the universal clip-on lid and pressure cook it. So bring home India's first multi-utility pressure cooker, Prestige Clip-on.
जो बीवी से करे प्यार, वो प्रेस्टीज से कैसे करे इनकार?
that Japan already has a military in place, and that this kind of constitution and the article in that constitution could raise some kind of national crisis if Japan, in fact, had to defend itself from some kind of provocation from North Korea. As for economic reforms, this paves the way for that 2 trillion yen stimulus plan Abe proposed prior to the election. He's also talked about moving forward with that 2019 hike, consumption tax hike in the amount of 2% by 2019. Now, it's important to note, yes, the LDP and its ruling coalition did gain 312 seats, a supermajority, but this was far from a ringing endorsement of Abe himself. In a poll that was conducted yesterday by NHK, 59% of the Japanese public saying they still do not approve of Abe, the leader. Abe acknowledged some of those challenges last night, saying that he was aware many people still had harsh views and that he would have to work humbly to achieve results.
Okay, well, that's the update coming on the political situation in Japan. But let's tell you what happened on Wall Street. U.S. stocks closed higher on Friday after the Senate passed a budget blueprint for the next fiscal year, paving the way for the tax cuts. The Dow Jones hit intraday and closing records. The S&P 500 also notched record highs, advancing 0.5% to close. The Republican-led Senate approved a $4 trillion budget measure by a 51-49 vote, unlocking reconciliation, which enables the GOP to pass a tax bill with a simple 51-vote majority in the Senate. Okay, a lot of politics there, but U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has called for closer ties between Saudi Arabia and Iraq in an effort to curb the brewing threat from Iran. Tillerson met with leaders of the two nations in Riyadh yesterday, where he participated in the inaugural session of the new Saudi Arabia-Iraq Council. He praised the two countries for fostering closer ties, including Saudi Arabia's decision to reopen its land borders with Iraq for the first time in nearly 30 years. After Riyadh, Tillerson moved on to Qatar, where he said he is not hopeful of Saudi Arabia willing to enter discussions to solve the ongoing diplomatic crisis in the Gulf.
There's not a strong indication that parties are ready to talk yet. And so we cannot force talks upon people who are not ready to talk. So there has been no invitation to the White House because it's not clear that parties are ready to engage. And we're going to continue to work towards that dialogue and towards that engagement.
All right, and in Europe, frontline indices were rather mixed and flat on investors on Friday as investors reacted to corporate earnings and monitored political developments in both UK as well as Spain. So the frontline index is absolutely flat. Volvo actually did really well, but keep an eye out on the periphery. So in the peripheral indices, we saw good gains come by, outperformance seen from the Italian markets as well as the Irish markets, all of them gaining. If you take a look at the emerging market space, though, that one was also in focus. The Russian index was down almost 0.3%, while the Brazilian index marginally in the green. But the focus, remember, was all on Spain. Spain, remember, has told the Catalonians to fall in line. The country has threatened to suspend the Catalonian regional government, which the Catalonian parliamentary speaker Carme Forcadell said amounts to a coup. In fact, on Sunday, the Spanish government also urged the Catalonian citizens to ignore secessionist leaders and accept authority from Madrid. The Catalan parliament will meet over the coming days to agree its response to the Spanish government's unprecedented decision.
The Catalan institutions and the people of Catalonia cannot accept this attack. The humiliation sought by the Spanish government as a guardian of all Catalan public life, from the government to the public media, is incompatible with a democratic attitude and is situated outside the rule of law.
Okay, well, let's tell you about the currency space then. The dollar has edged up to a 3-month high against the yen with an emphatic election victory for Japan's ruling party, keeping the yen weakening. Reflationary measures at the heart of the government policy. The election outcome added extra lift to the dollar, already on a bullish footing, thanks to progress on the US tax reform.
In the world of commodities, crude oil prices rise over supply concerns in the Middle East, and as the US market also showed further signs of tightening, while demand in Asia keeps rising. Prices also drawing support from a sharp decline in the Iraqi crude exports due to tensions in the Kurdistan region.
And from precious metals, gold prices fell after the Senate approved a budget blueprint that paves the way for tax cuts, causing stocks, the dollar and bond yields to rise.
Right then, let's slip into a short break, come back and we'll focus on our markets, all the cues and news you need to know for trade this morning.
Welcome back. You are still tuned into Power Breakfast on CNBC TV18. Well, back home on Dalal Street, it was actually a subdued start to the new Samvat on Muhurat trade. The Sensex closed the session down around 194 points. The Nifty also was down around 64 odd points and closed at 10,146. Well, Manglam, what are the cues looking like?
Looks like a good day. That's exactly what the SGX Nifty is indicating. But as far as the Muhurat trade is concerned, remember, we lost about 0.6% on both the Nifty and the Sensex. The Nifty Bank was the key underperformer there. But also keep in mind that was on account of a couple of global fears and low volumes. That one actually aggravated the dip, because if you take a look at the cash market volumes are close to about 7,000 crores. The F&O volume too slightly higher, primarily on account of the fact that we are entering expiry week. But really nothing in terms of volumes on the Muhurat trading session, so that has actually aggravated the dip. As far as today is concerned, we're getting strong global cues, and we have a good indication as far as the Dow is concerned, Asia is concerned, and the SGX Nifty, as we alluded to, indicates a start closer to that 10,200 mark. So that will be important, because remember, the Nifty Thursday futures close was at 10146. So in that regard, the SGX Nifty indicates a slightly higher start than what it optically is looking at. The only worry again is the FII selling. FIIs have sold for 23 sessions in a row, and the Muhurat trade was no different. 44 crore worth net selling, but again, that was selling nevertheless. In this month itself, the FIIs have sold close to $1.5 billion. The domestic institutional investors, though, they've gone ahead and bought. The net inflows so far have been 800 crore rupees, but the key triggers this week really will be earnings. Ekta, 39% of Nifty's weight reports earnings this week, all the way from Indiabulls Housing today. We have Ambuja, Asian Paints, as well as HDFC reporting their numbers tomorrow. Infosys reporting their numbers tomorrow. From the consumer space, HUL, nearly all of Nifty Bank is reporting its numbers this week. The private bank especially. You have Kotak Bank, Yes Bank, ICICI Bank, and towards the end of the week we have ITC and Maruti as well. So that is something we'll be watching out for. Earnings will reign supreme this week as far as the frontline index is concerned. And also the F&O October series expiry is something that we'll be watching out for. The 10,200 calls and puts have been most active for a premium of 125 rupees. So from 10,200, 125 points either side could be the range perhaps which the smart money is playing for.
Okay, and stocks?
Stocks, we'll talk about earnings. So we spoke about Indiabulls Housing Finance reporting the numbers today. Apart from that, we have Hindustan Zinc and Havells as well reporting the numbers. Dr. Reddy's, you tell us that the US court has said Newaring's 2018 patent expiry is valid. So that means it's positive, perhaps more business for Dr. Reddy's. Hero Motocorp, they reported to the exchanges that they sold the highest number of motorbikes they've ever did this Dhanteras. HUL is one stock I'll be watching out for, because Unilever reported its numbers over the weekend, and they've said the volume growth in India improved after GST implementation. Some green there. Bajaj Auto could be the volume growth in India improved after GST implementation. Some green there. Bajaj Auto could be a bit of an issue given Sri Lanka, we understand from reports, is going to restrict import of three-wheeler taxis, and Bajaj Auto supplies a lot of them. And finally, we have Bhushan Steel. That one, ArcelorMittal, we understand, has joined the race to acquire the company under the bankruptcy code. And finally, IEX, that one lists on the bourses today.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much for that, Manglam. But after posting a good 18% return in Samvat 2073, the Nifty has started the new Samvat on a subdued note. CNBC TV18's Nimish Shah caught up with Ramdev Agarwal of Motilal Oswal and began by asking him what he thinks of the market and how do the earnings look in this quarter so far.
See, the right now going is very good. I mean, whatever you can say, economy is looking up, earnings momentum is building up from this quarter itself, and the flow of domestics are really buying this time, and foreigners are also getting scared of selling anymore. So I think the mood is very good, so valuations are a little high, but mood is very good and flow is very good. So I think the companies which are going to do well they are going to be saluted like never before. Okay. So the earnings will be respected, and stocks will see higher prices. Index movement, because of mixed earning scenario, might be much more calibrated in the sense that maybe another 10%, 15% kind of gain. But stocks will go up big time.
Over the last few years, your investments have been quite transparent through your Focus 35 fund. And I see some of those small pharma companies getting added into the portfolio. Jubilant Life, Eris Life, a couple of other stocks are added. Ajanta has been your favorite. What is your view on the pharma space?
So we are optimistic on the pharma because one is that it's a very secular industry. So Eris and all, they are like for the local consumption, you know. Okay. And they're new companies, very energetic entrepreneur. But another opportunity is the global pharma in the sense that global generics, which Indians are able to produce very high quality at a very, very reasonable prices. So that opportunity is very large, and we think few companies like, newer company like Ajanta or Jubilant, who makes it there only and sells it. So it's a very good space. In last 2 years, we have not made that much money. First round, we made money in Ajanta, but we lost money in Lupin. We lost money in Sun. But I think this industry is not down and out. It's taken a breather. It will again take off.
All right, that was Ramdev Agarwal saying that the pharma industry is not down and out. With that, we'll slip into a short break, come back, and we'll have an exclusive conversation with Ravi Shankar Prasad on the progress in talks with Apple about the company's plans for manufacturing handsets in India.
The digital profile of India is, in a population of 1.30 billion, only 1.21 billion mobile phones.
Right.
Only 500 million smartphones. Good number of digital identity, Aadhaar, which we say about 1.18 billion. Thriving digital economy prospects. Any investors coming into India is going to be a gainer. And if Apple is already having a big footprint, I'm also using an Apple, you're using an Apple, other phones too. Therefore, it will be a big gain for them. The negotiations are on. I can only tell you, it is a work in progress. We will have a very good resolution. But I would like to gently remind one thing. A lot of other players have also come, okay?
Yes.
Therefore, the sheer size of India's market will keep into account all these considerations.
What about phased manufacturing program? I had specifically asked about that. What is its future? Do you think by the 31st of March, it's something that is just going to be institutionalized and put in place?
You see, the date is very much there.
Okay.
We have to be also a little pragmatic. Suppose anyone wants a little extension beyond 31st. I should stop it completely.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm only inquiring how this is going to pan out.
It is going to pan out very well. We have got a very open mind on that, and we are equally determined to have the whole deadline also. And let me tell you, our government is a very open government. And we also take into account the legitimate concerns of legitimate players.
Yes.
So we can be flexible. But this particular 31st March is a deadline given, and I think it will ultimately become deliverable.
I was reading somewhere that an internal committee has been institutionalized as far as artificial intelligence is concerned. However, there has been no official intimation about it. Could you share a little more details about the terms of reference? What kind of participants
I will
are
not
involved?
go into that except to highlight that we are making policies on artificial intelligence, on new electronic policy, on the new policy on Internet of Things. All the new technology needed, we are coming with an India-specific policy, and obviously giving a good platform for foreign players also. I can talk about data. Data is important.
Yes.
And India is generating a lot of data. Recently, we have opened up about more than 100,000 government data for entrepreneurs for the purposes of healthcare, education, agriculture-related work. Therefore, we are undertaking a very big committee I have set up. Justice Sri Krishna, former Judge of Supreme Court, is the chairperson. Data utility, data availability, data innovation, data privacy, all have to be managed properly.
Okay, well, moving on then, in a fresh twist to the Aadhaar debate, Indian Banks Association has written to the IT Ministry questioning the UIDAI's jurisdiction over banks. The IBA has questioned the UIDAI directive to make branches double up as Aadhaar enrollment centres. The IBA has specifically raised concern over 2 notifications sent by the UIDAI to banks on July 14th. The UIDAI authority had directed banks to open enrollment and updating facilities in at least 1/10 of their branches. Following this notification, many banks, including public sector banks, had engaged with private parties to kick off the process.
And in its second notification on October 7th, the UIDAI had made it mandatory for banks to access Aadhaar registrar and enrollment agencies. However, there has been no official notification from the Reserve Bank of India to the banks to set up these enrollment centers, and so far the Aadhaar is only mandatory for KYC purposes. The IBA has raised concern on whether the UIDAI has the jurisdiction to direct banks to undertake such Aadhaar-related activities, and if yes, why has there been no directive from the Reserve Bank on this matter? This gains significance as there is no deadline, or there is a deadline attached to the UIDAI notification, and banks may have to pay a penalty for non-compliance.
Okay, well, meanwhile, the Reserve Bank of India has said biometric identity number Aadhaar linkage with bank accounts is mandatory. The RBI clarification followed media reports quoting a reply to a right to information application that suggested the Apex Bank had not issued any order for mandatory Aadhaar linkage with bank accounts.
And let's get you some more market opinion then. Ramesh Damani, he is optimistic on the market going ahead. He also believes that the next 6 months will be a litmus test for the earnings. Here's an excerpt.
Liquidity trumps valuation sometimes within a bull market. I think clearly, as everyone has argued, that valuations are excessive compared to their earnings, but it was liquidity that held up this market. You had shocks in North Korea, you had problems of Fed raising the interest rate, you had problems of earnings, and despite all of that, the market held up and in fact closed at the highs. So this gives me some thought that sometimes within the bull run, liquidity is of paramount importance. We've always heard that liquidity is the mother's milk of a bull market. I think we're seeing good expression right now of that.
Oh, yeah, that's it. That point is taken. But Mr. Damani, you know, we are seeing some green shoots, you think? I mean, Bajaj Auto numbers, export numbers for September, you know, 26% higher. Then all those PMI and IIP numbers, as well Reliance numbers. Are all these giving you the sense that we will not be worrying about earnings 6 months down the line?
See, export numbers, I don't know, they were flash in the pan. Before that, they were poor. So we'll have to watch them for a few months and see how they are doing. Some sectors of the economy are doing very well. I think we're shifting from a huge unorganized economy to an organized economy. And I think it's a bit of la-la land thinking to think that it would not cause trouble to the economy. So I think that is slowly getting ironed out. There's some sectors like auto, OMCs, which continue to do well and continue to, you know, perform good earnings out there. The rest of the market will have to catch up. And like I said, the next 6 months are perhaps a good litmus test whether the market's earnings are catching up with the valuations.
I know you won't be talking stocks, but what would be the broad themes that you will be betting on for this Samvat, or for that matter for next 3 or 4 years?
What excites me about India is still the huge consumer market. And I think we need to kind of look at it differently. So some of the sectors, you know, which will do well, which we've liked in the past, is property, affordable housing, airlines. But among the new sectors, I think if you look at those gaming casino stocks, they're at fairly cheap valuations relative to their potential. So they will do well. And a theme that I've explored with you previously, Lata, the quick service restaurants. I think in the next 4 or 5 years, these are almost bulletproof businesses that are not affected by technology. And I think the incumbents will have a huge advantage in these businesses because people will want better standards of living, better entertainment, better relaxation modes. Those look like good bets for the next 5 to 10 years, which I would populate for a young person. But if you want Samvat to Samvat, I think OMCs will probably do well. I think they're on a very high earnings trajectory. Dividend payouts are very good. So I have all reason to believe, and there's been a volume explosion in terms of petrol, diesel, which has been missed by the markets. So I think, you know, on a Samvat to Samvat basis, OMC look good to me. But on a longer 5-10 year basis, I would look at the sectors I mentioned earlier.
Okay, opinion coming in there. Time for a break now. But growth is a problem, acknowledges the MPC or the Monetary Policy Committee. But minutes show that consensus is for structural reforms to beat the slowdown. and not rate cuts. Details once we're back. Well, Yes Bank is on our radar this morning. The RBI inspection for FY17 has not been done yet. Lata joins in with more details on what the impact on Yes Bank could be. Lata, morning.
It's a small, probably temporary relief for the market. After the Axis numbers came in, the divergence issue that the NPS previously reported may be actually larger was something that had sent all the private sector banks into a bit of a, especially the corporate lenders, into a bit of a shell. Now, what we gathered over the weekend is that Yes Bank's inspection is not over. So, one doesn't know if there will be divergence. There may not be after all. But in any case, we are not going to get to know that along with the second quarter numbers. ICICI's, however, the inspection is done. Mostly the full report would be out. And therefore, that is something we should keep on our radar. But the market has already reacted adequately to the potential impact of, possible divergence on these stocks.
All right, we'll keep an eye out on that. But Lata, the RBI, they uploaded on the website the minutes of the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, which was held on October 4th. The tone, that one appeared to be a tad more hawkish than even the monetary policy statement?
Yeah, that certainly was the impression that bond dealers have gathered. I'll just read out the more important statements. First of all, we must give more importance to what the governor had to say. And his statement sounded more worried about the upside risks to inflation. Okay. Despite the feeling that food inflation will not rise much, he was worried that the other non-food inflation is showing rigidity at lower levels, refusing to go lower. And he also used words like vigilant. We have to remain vigilant on inflation. Now, that's a very strong word. And then, of course, he speaks about worries over fisc and external risks to inflation. So that sounded a bit hawkish. Viral Acharya clearly said that we have to remain focused on 4% CPI in the medium term. Now, that is, of course, the mandate of the MPC, but the expectation was that because of the softness in growth, they may be a little less insistent on that 4%. After all, it's 4% plus or minus 2. So they can use an elbow room, but nobody seemed in a mood to use that. And even the only man who was dovish, who has been dovish, Dholakia, after all argued for 25 basis. So the overall tone, and given the fact that US yields were higher overnight, we are likely to see maybe about 3 to 5 basis points higher yields today.
Okay, well, that's what's happening with the macros. Thanks very much, Lata, for that. But let's stay with the macros. The worst is over and growth is on its way up again. That's the word coming in from two economic advisors to the government. One is Ashma Goyal, member of the Prime Minister's newly formed Economic Advisory Council, and the other is Sanjeev Sanyal, the principal economic advisor. They were speaking to Lata Venkatesh along with Morgan Stanley's Chetan Iyer. Both Goyal and Iyer went on to say that growth could touch the 7% mark next year.
There was sort of some short-term effects of perhaps GST, and these look like they're being overcome. So we should see a somewhat better performance.
What kind of a growth are you seeing over the next 4 quarters? Will we average well over 7%?
I think we could reach about 7% at present.
We introduced an enormous number of potentially painful reforms over the last couple of years. But I think the worst of the pain is being felt now, or we may have even gone past it. The growth numbers seem to have stabilized, and hopefully from here on they begin picking up. You see, in the end, we have to think in terms of having 20, 30 years of sustained high growth rates. So a few quarters of slowdown here or there won't matter.
So for the second quarter, we expect it to be at 6.5, and from there on, we will see that second half of the financial year will average above 7%, and for the full year, we are at 6.7% in this financial year, and the coming financial year, we expect growth to be at 7.5%. So the official statistics will show a clear acceleration from here too.
All right, those are the macros. We'll drill it down to the micros just after this short break. In fact, we'll talk about Indian Energy Exchange, IEX. That one lists on the bourses today More details after the short breaks. Varinder Bansal joins with more details. Varinder, it was subscribed by what, 2.3 times or something? What is the expectation?
Well, honestly, it was not the best of the subscriptions.
Right.
What people were thinking about IEX. Award on IEX, clearly, it is India's first and the largest exchange for trading of electricity and renewable energy certificates. By far, they have the monopoly because they control nearly 95% of the market. The issues, just scaled through, as you mentioned. Issue price was 1650, and the expected market cap at that higher band is nearly 5,000 crores. If I can just say, it's kind of an exchange which is strong, steady. Okay, you could expect 15% growth from this exchange going ahead as well, and that has been the case since last 4 years. So sales growth of 14%, profit growth of 14% the last 4 years, EBITDA growth of 14%. Volume growth has been nearly 16-17%. So, in the last 4 years, they've been consistently growing by that 14-15% growth rate. In any exchange, you could expect, that the return on net worth could be 38-40%. You could expect that the EBITDA margins will be 70-75%. You could expect that the sales profit will be growing by 15%. So it's a steady, strong story which is going on. Valuations, yes, it is a bit expensive, because the FY18 expected price earning is nearly 40 times. EV EBITDA is nearly 24 times on a FY18 basis. So a bit, expensive. But again, if you have to, compare, there is no, listed peer-to-peer exchange like IEX. But we have BSE, we have MCX. They also trade around these levels. The only thing is that in the last 2 years, because there has been a lot of transactions wherein, the investors who were sitting on it have sold it to other people in the market. So in the last 2 years, actually, the value of IEX have gained nearly 2 times in last 2 years. I remember a deal wherein one of the NRI bought 4.1% stake from Reliance Infra. The valuation that was 2,500 crores. So now we are talking about 5,000 crores. So last 2 years, the valuations have already run up. So I expected tepid listing today from IEX, not anything substantial today. But yes, a long-term investor will always be part of this story because you are just getting consistent, strong returns over next many, many years. And it's a monopoly.
Okay, all right, Varinder. Thanks very much for that. But let's shift focus to earnings now. Indiabulls Housing Finance is on the radar. Abhishek joins in with a quick preview on that. Abhishek, over to you.
Well, steady set of numbers that Indiabulls Housing Finance has been reporting is expected to continue today. So loan growth between 30 to 35% will be seen as a positive one. Last quarter, it was at 33%. Now, spreads above 3.1% will be positive. The spreads have been between 3.2 to 3.25%. Gross NPA, steady set of numbers that have been coming in. Any gross NPA below 0.95% will be very positive. Last quarter, it was at 0.8%. Now, Motilal Oswal has an estimate for this company wherein they suggest that consolidate NII to grow up by 34% while net profit after minority interest to grow by 21%. Key point to note will be the impact of interest rates, that is both on the asset side and the liability side going ahead. Liability side, the cost of funds have been reducing for NBFCs while pressure can be on the yield side because banks have been reducing their rates. And also their outlook in terms of affordable housing finance where Indiabulls has been, focusing off late, so that will be seen very closely. Back to you.
All right, we'll keep an eye out on that, Abhishek. Thanks a lot for that. Let's move on to another CNBC TV18 exclusive. Our colleague Malvika Jain, she caught up with Qualcomm India President Larry Paulson and began by asking him what were the key takeaways from the meeting that he had with Ravi Shankar Prasad in New York. Here's a short excerpt of that.
That what the minister did first and foremost was reinforce the strategies to make sure that the individuals in the room understood the key strategies, really focusing heavily on digitizing or digital India and then all of the activities that go with that. And I think the dialogue, there were probably 2 things that talked about. We talked a little bit about the Make in India initiative and what are the next steps on that Make in India in terms of converting the factories from an assembly into a full PCB board manufacturing. So that activity was discussed. And then there was some clarification in the room on the role of GST and the role of, as you know, India has a fairly high banking rate compared to the rest of the world. And there were some comments about how would a business is set up.
But was there any indication that the rates would come down? I mean, he's not the person in charge.
He's not the person in charge.
But did he indicate anything?
No. All he could indicate was that if there's an issue, let's discuss. Right.
Sure. And as far as Make in India is concerned, what to your mind are the steps that the government needs to take?
What has happened in India, remarkably, is through the Make in India initiative, you have seen the assembly of, in our business, of mobile phones grow dramatically, almost from a 0 to 85–90%. So you ask about the next step. The next step in that assembly means you bring in parts from wherever they are manufactured, put them together, and test them and put out a phone, so to speak, package. So the next step would be to actually have the board, the PCB board, come in without pre-populated parts on it. That would drive two things. That would drive what we call an SMT, or a semiconductor manufacturing system. That would drive a different level of investment for the factories. And then that also would require then the ecosystem, so the component suppliers themselves.
But what kind of support would you need from the government in this regard?
The PMP policy is laid out. The phased manufacturing plan is laid out. And so it's a question of whether or not the policy is enforced in the timelines that it currently states.
And by when are you expecting that to happen? By the 31st of March?
Correct.
Is there an assurance from the government that the PMP would actually come into effect from that date?
That was actually the dialogue that was discussed this evening, that to communicate clearly to the ecosystem, to the manufacturers, that date is in fact going to be enforced.
Okay, time for a break now, but up next we'll get you a check on all the cues in the futures and options space. Stay tuned. Let's go across to Manisha Gupta now. She joins in with an update on all what's taking place in the commodity space. Manisha, morning.
Well, thank you so much for that. It is the crude oil prices which are buzzing higher in the Asian markets right now. Previous week as well, we have seen support come in for this, and there are various factors supportive. To start with, there is this concern, violence, unrest in the Middle East, especially on the oil facilities in Iraq, and that's taking the prices on the higher side. All the reports that you have seen come in from Asia, especially India and China, do show an estimate of a further increase in demand. That's adding a premium to prices, especially actually when you look at the Indian numbers. The imports in India for the month of September have been at a record high. So whether you look at the month-on-month numbers, year-on-year numbers, they are on the higher side. And this demand growth is expected to continue to be high. India actually has surpassed global growth for crude as well. So that is one thing that the crude oil markets exporters actually are keeping a keen eye on. The other area that has done well really has been the industrial metals. You have seen the U.S. demand come in after the hurricane, so the resale of homes in U.S. has been on the higher side. Also, if you look at the consumption numbers from China, those have been positive. Output cuts in China are only catching pace right now. So you have the steel, nickel, and aluminum. These three metals have continued to gain up. These three metals did very well in the previous week, and you have seen the best of fundamentals continuing for these.
All right, Manisha, thanks a lot for that. Let's shift focus from the commodity space into the futures and options space now as the October series expiry week begins. Remember, this series so far we've gained about 3.5–4%, which is in line with what we did in the last 3 Octobers as well. So as the expiry week begins, we'll watch out for what the FIIs did. We'll ignore what happened on a Muhurat trading session given the meek volumes that there were. But if you take a look at October 18th, out there the FIIs, they bought about 1,000 crores in index futures and increased their long exposure in index futures to the highest that we've seen in this series at 65%. That compares to 56% at the start of this series. Also, on October 18th itself, we saw a lot of selling by the FIIs in stock futures, close to 1,000 crores worth selling out there as well. And that was given the sort of weakness that we saw in the banks. That perhaps explains the sort of selling that we saw there. Axis, ICICI and SBI accounting for most amount of the FII stock futures selling. But on the Muhurat day itself, one strike was fairly active, and that was the 10,200 strike. If you take a look at 10,200 call, that one saw a lot of writing for about 35 rupees, and the 10,200 put, that one saw a lot of short covering. So keep an eye out on the 10,200 mark, and the 10,200 premium, the straddle, which is a call and a put together, that trades at a premium of close to 125 rupees. Perhaps the smart money is playing for a range of 1075 and 10325 perhaps.
Okay, all right, Mangalam, thanks very much for that. On to our bullseye corner then. Our contestants this week, we have Vishwesh Chauhan, Rakesh Bansal, Richard Jain, who are battling it out for the strongest portfolio. Let's listen into their picks for day one.
First is a short on Voltas with a stop loss of 547 and for the target of 511. Second is a buy on Torrent Power with a stop loss of 240 and for the target of 260. Third is a buy on Pennar Industry with a stop loss of 69.70 and for the target of 75 rupees. And last is a short on Development Credit Bank with a stop loss of 183 and for the target of 171.
My first call is a buy call on Shiva Cement by Shiva Cement. Stop loss 24.90, target 40. My second call is a buy call on Donier Industries by Donier Industries. Stop loss 57.90, target 72. My third call is a buy call on Ganesha Benzoplast by Ganesha Benzoplast. Stop loss 95.40, target 120. My last call is a buy call on Genus Power by Genus Power. Stop loss 57.80, target 74.
All right, let's move on to Ruchit Jain's picks. His first pick of the day is a buy call on NBCC with a stop loss at 247.5, target at 264. Second pick also a buy on Bliss GVS with a stop loss placed at 175 and a target of 194. Third pick again a buy on Everready with a stop loss of 321 and a target of 340. And last call a buy as well on GMDC with a stop loss placed at 151 and a target of 161.
Okay, and on that note, we're going to wrap up our breakfast. Stay tuned. Bazaar Morning Call up next.